Now it's our turn to, sorry for the words, but put our balls on the table.
Remember, kids, this is not how you play hockey. It's just ugly.
I like it.
Screw you guys. I'm doing this.
You know what? I love ice cream too.
Go back to Canada, Guy Lafleur.
Game on!
Yeah, game on.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Hockey Show right here on Mile High Sports, where we talk all things hockey. It's a playoff edition 2021. I'm not hungover this week, Ryan. I'm feeling great. I'm buzzing already. Can you hear it in my voice?
Yeah, you have way more energy.
Yeah, exactly. I was half asleep last time. So I'm JJ Ryan here, of course, with me to talk some hockey with you for the next hour. We're going to have Lindsey Brown of Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas to kind of preview the Las Vegas and Colorado Avalanche series that we have ahead. Are you excited for it?
I'm ready.
I'm ready too. As we start every show, matinee money, and I'm giving up on hockey. I did so bad, I think I ended 4-11. So for this season, I'm scrapping it on my matinee money picks. I'm going with the Rockies to lose. It's the best bet in town. Rockies to lose against Pittsburgh Pirates today, -121. I'm also going soccer, the biggest game of the year in soccer. Champions League final today at 1 p.m., Man City versus Chelsea. I'm going with Man City. Man City's just a wagon. And, of course, I got to take the Nuggets, right? You can't forget about what the Nuggets are doing right now. Plus, the odds on the Nuggets tonight are amazing. +163. on a money line.
Hot. I want to say betting on the Rockies betting against the Rockies feels like that early season scenario where you would bet against the Sabres and they lost 18 games
and then
or
they
whatever
somehow win one.
And then I bet on them to lose and they won their first game. So it's still a dangerous situation. But, yeah, I'm with you. I can't follow your lead on picks anymore because you led me astray too many times.
Too many.
But I went with the odds boost, my favorite play of the weekend, the DraftKings odds boost, with Habs to score last and win, +215. So I threw a $5 down on that. And then I picked a little parlay. I picked the over 5 and the Isles to win today at +370.
Now, that Habs pick is interesting because, of course, Toronto being the favorite, but right now we're seeing a home game in Montreal with fans
for the first time in 444 days.
Right, so we're going to dive a little bit into that in segment 3, but for now, let's just stick with the Avalanche. Since we last spoke, the Avalanche complete their sweep. I know it's been a while, right? We've spent this whole week not watching Avalanche hockey, so it feels like this is old, rotten news, but you and I haven't gotten the chance to break it down, really. So I guess now seeing that the Avalanche clean up against the St. Louis Blues, maybe we expected a win, but maybe not that violent of a win, right?
I expected more out of St. Louis. I guess they were more outmatched than I anticipated, and that, it was a first and last as far as teams making this postseason from this conference matching. So it's not as surprising, on paper, but the Blues were a little decimated with having lost Bortuzzo, Falk, having not had David Perron. Apparently, the guys who tested positive for COVID before that series started were already vaccinated, which is a little weird for them. And they had that random testing scare in the middle of the series where both them and Vegas had a bunch of players test positive, and it was false positives through the test. But I thought St. Louis could have put up more of a fight than they did. They just didn't have anything going, and that says a lot about what the Avs are capable of.
Well, and you pointed it out last week, that series, what ultimately ended up being the series-defining play when Binnington came to challenge the puck and Ryan Graves ended up scoring. I think that was the defining moment of the entire thing. We thought it was just the defining moment of that game, but it turned out that was the exact moment where it seems like St. Louis just kind of broke.
I try to think about scenarios where maybe you are in a game personally and your goalie or a player on your team does something that's really hard to recover from mentally. It feels like the straw that broke the camel's back, to be cliche about it. But to me, the game wasn't over until Newhook scored that second goal, because it was like, all right, we spotted him one. We can come back from one. I feel like in most series, not all of them, but a 2-goal deficit is pretty hard to overcome. It takes a lot of mojo and magic to do it. You really want to keep games within a goal, keep them close. So, I couldn't get past that moment where it was like, this is the best your team's played this whole series, and you come out and you make a big mistake. You're overplaying the puck. We saw it from, and I'm going to butcher his name even though I've heard it a million times now, but Nedeljkovic from Carolina.
Nedeljkovic.
He had a game. I'm not sure if it was the game they won the series or the game before. I think it was the game they won the series. He was just overplaying the puck. He was overplaying positionally. He was moving too much. He was trying to do too much. I think he ended up having a sort of giveaway goal in that game. And you're like, just fall into yourself. Fall into your rhythm, fall into your routine. Do what you know you need to do. Don't try to overplay your position. I think that's what Binnington was doing. They needed him to be excellent, and at times he was. But plays like that were him trying to do too much, and it cost them.
Sure, and that's kind of the play you're seeing from Philip Grubauer right now, right? He's not overdoing anything. He's just calm, composed and poised. I put him into one word there. But I guess I wanted to ask you in regards to the Avalanche. I mean, obviously it sounds like you are of the mindset that the Blues just were outmatched, right? They just got outplayed. It wasn't necessarily that they dropped the ball. So how has the opinion of the Avalanche in your eyes changed, what, if at all, after that series?
It hasn't really, because I've been waiting all season for some sort of hard adversity for this squad to go through, and I've wanted to ask Jared Bednar about that multiple times, and I just haven't gotten around to it or didn't get called on. But I think, this is a team that hasn't faced a whole lot of adversity or any sort of prolonged adversity. There's no we got to dig deep and pull this one out kind of situation. So I still don't really know where they stand. Like I said, I thought the Blues would put up more of a fight than they did.
So you kind of think that wasn't exactly a first-round playoff caliber test?
I think the Avs played playoff hockey for sure. I think at times the Blues did. One thing that I know, and I know we'll get into this later, but watching this series between Minnesota and Vegas, it seemed like there was a tenacity and hunger from both teams that wasn't necessarily present in that Avs-Blues series.
Yeah, I mean, the Avalanche, kind of like they did all year, they really only found half their scoring during half of the games, right? They wait till about halfway through, and then they really put their foot on the gas. But I guess looking back at the St. Louis Blues series a little bit more, what would you say was some of the biggest components for Colorado to come out with that sweep? Not just the victory in the series, but the sweep.
Yeah, I think goaltending was an aspect of it, but I don't think that the Blues were able to contain the top line. I think for Vegas, the real big challenge here is going to be to contain Nathan MacKinnon, because, he had 9 points in 4 games, and that's pretty lethal. I think, the Avs have a lot of depth, and if they can get that depth going, it makes them super dangerous. But that's what teams have to focus on, right? If you can shut down the best players to the best of your ability and force the pressure to be on those depth guys, maybe that changes the dynamic. But right now, everybody's rolling on that team, and they're so confident and loose. It's kind of unheard of, in the playoffs. It should be generally a stressful time with a lot of games. The Avs swept. They've had a week off. They're calm, cool, collected, rested. It's weird.
I think I got to point to simply the power play at 50%, Ryan. Half of the power plays that they were given, they scored on. So those numbers were a little bit inflated by the double minor there at the end of Game 4 when Nathan MacKinnon and I think Mikko Rantanen scored an empty netter. So it's inflated a little bit, but still, obviously the power play was a huge threat. You saw even through the St. Louis Blues body language whenever they'd get a penalty, how they were just kind of like, oh, shoot, I messed up, and we're probably going to pay for this, and usually they were half the time.
I think on top of that, the Avs were averaging 1.5 empty net goals a game. No, that can't be right. Yeah, 4 games. Yes, that's right. 1.5. So they had 6 empty net goals in 4 games. That's almost 2 a game, which just, tells you they really take advantage of the situations presented to them. And you can't sleep. You can't be down by multiple goals late in the game and need, 4 minutes of no goalie to try and get back into it, because you can't contain these guys.
Yep. Puck line hitters, right? Which I love. That's something they kind of struggled with throughout the year, was burying those empty nets and really sealing games late. They'd still win, just wouldn't get the empty nets. Now they're taking care of empty nets and hitting those puck lines, which I love to see, and it.
We should be betting on to score last odds. MacKinnon, Rantanen.
Yeah, that's a good
Avs
good
to
point.
score last, because I believe that's an option in there, and I don't know why I didn't just think of it
I bet you Bellemare would have some pretty sweet odds too, and that's kind of his thing. I think he scored most of his goals this year on an empty net. So, that brings me to the conversation of rest versus rust, right? This is kind of the common conversation when you see a team sweep and they're going up against a team that just played 7 games. So, what's your take on that? Do you think this is going to hinder the Avalanche in any facet, or do you think this is a good thing for Colorado? Is this overstated? What do you think of the rest versus rust conversation?
I've had a hard time with this one in particular because, and we've talked about this back when you and I had our Avalanche Talk podcast. I couldn't think of the word there.
What a podcast it was.
It was legendary. But I went through, remember, and I looked at the Avs record coming out of the Christmas break, and they were terrible. They were terrible. They had a massively overwhelming losing record coming out of a prolonged stoppage. So, and that's granted without practices and things like that, a little rust there. So I'm mixed on this because I feel like the Avs are as lethal as they could always be or ever be. But at the same time, that game intensity hasn't been there. However, I think it's BS that Vegas or had Minnesota won, that either team was getting a one-day break between that and the next series. Like, that's excessive to me. On top of which, the Nuggets play in Denver on Tuesday. So
Go, Denver.
I don't know why you're scheduling a game on Sunday knowing that you're either going to have to play again on Monday or the next game's not going to be until Wednesday. So you either give Vegas no rest and then force them to play a back-to-back or a game, and then they have 2 days rest. Like, it's bizarre. On top of which, I'm going to stand on this soapbox for a minute. We only know of one game of this series scheduled so far. Like, are you waiting on the Nuggets? Is that what it's coming down to? Like, are we waiting on something in Vegas? What is the situation that the NHL can't put out a complete second-round schedule?
I don't know, but it's no question, no secret that series was just tough for Vegas, and they might be limping into it of sorts. I think they're a little bit mentally broken too when it comes to offensive production. So I think the Avalanche have Vegas right where they want them going into Game 1. But we'll get more into that next with Lindsey here. Stick around through the break. We'll get her on the phones and break down the series. So we'll be right back here on Mile High Sports. This is the Hockey Show. JJ Jerez, Ryan Bowling, Danny Bailey.
Right now, it's 16 minutes past the big hour. Is that not right, Mr. Scream? Great, good stuff. I think people are getting really cranked.
Welcome back in. It's the Hockey Show, Colorado's biggest and best live hockey radio show right here on Mile High Sports. I got to give Danny some kudos before we head to the phones here. Danny, you waited until exactly 12:16 to get Mr. Scream on and tell us that it was 16 minutes past the hour. But let's go to the man advantage. Time to hit the power play. And we have Lindsey Brown on the phones. Of course, Lindsey does a radio show every day, 3 to 5, on Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas. And she's one of the few members in the Las Vegas Golden Knights press box. Not even Las Vegas. I blew it already. Lindsey, how you doing?
It's okay. I understand the mistake off the bat here because I'm sure you guys were just as excited about the Game 7 win for the Vegas Golden Knights over the Minnesota Wild last night because we all know that the NHL and every hockey fan, Vegas, Colorado, otherwise, has had the second-round matchup that is officially going to be starting tomorrow, and I could not be more excited.
Yeah, not going to lie. While I think a lot of Colorado Avalanche fans were really rooting for the Minnesota Wild, I needed the Golden Knights there just because I have to watch the two best teams in the NHL duke it out in a playoff series, right? So, I mean, is that your same sentiment, and how excited is just Las Vegas as a whole for this second-round matchup?
I share your vision for this overall. I think it would be a better, more advantageous matchup for the Colorado Avalanche to face the Minnesota Wild, considering how well they played against them this year. But it's about getting the best hockey that you possibly can for the playoffs, and I just don't know if there's a matchup that's going to exist this year that could supersede this. There's always a matchup every year where you're like, well, this could be a cup final, and it just happens to be ours. And the town, they're excited, but I think we're more relieved because we were very happy just to get by Minnesota because as you guys dominate them, they were a really big trouble for us. And so to oust them in Game 7, to get Max Pacioretty back in the lineup, it's like getting an ace right off the chute on the blackjack table, and you're holding on for dear life, and then all of a sudden, face card, winner, winner, chicken dinner, let's go.
I mean, and Patches came in and made an immediate impact, but is this team really, really missing McNabb at this point?
I mean, they are. I think they missed his physicality, but I think, if you had to compare the two, Pacioretty's absence was definitely weighing on the team more. The Vegas Golden Knights are so deep in terms of their defensive stable. You guys are well on your way, if not already there, with that quote-unquote problem in Colorado. But McNabb isn't the most fleet of foot type of defenseman. And so he might be a guy that wouldn't be utilized as much in the Colorado series as he would be in Minnesota, because that's really what we're doing each and every series, and that we've done all season. Is just you're just trying to piece together who's available to us, who gives us the best chance to win, and hope that decision works out.
Lindsey, I tweeted last night when Janmark had his hat trick, and somebody tweeted back to me, F the Knights, and I said, K. And he said that they were a dirty team. Do you think that the Golden Knights crossed the line physically into a dirty team? And I'm saying this knowing full well that out here in Colorado, Nazem Kadri is sitting on the sidelines for the dirtiest hit we've seen in the playoffs.
Well, I think the best, the people that are toying with greatness are the ones that toe that line. And sometimes it ends up being a situation like you just highlighted with Kadri. I don't think there's any place for that hit in this game, whether the number of games to match for the punishment is neither here nor there for me. I mean, yeah, everybody's going to take some liberties. Everybody's going to have a hit, go a little awry. I don't think Ryan Reeves intentionally hit Ryan Suter face first into the crossbar last night, but that's what happened. And that's what happens when you play hard and you happen to be, a more physically domineering team. That's just part of the game. Sometimes the calls are going to go your way, and sometimes they're going to bite you in the butt. But I'd rather have a team that is towing that line and sometimes going over it than a team that is playing a little bit more inside of themselves and not as aggressive, because this is not the time to be meek.
We're talking to Lindsey Brown right here on the Hockey Show with JJ and Ryan. Lindsey, you and I are both former goaltenders or current goaltenders, however you want to look at it. So let's talk about the one thing you and I really care about, and that's the matchup in the crease, right? Philip Grubauer, Marc-Andre Fleury, two of the best goalies in the regular season right now. I would love to have either on my team. I guess what's your take on who's got the upper hand in net?
I mean, it's such an interesting way that these two teams have kind of circled each other all year, not just in keeping pace for the President's Trophy that comes down to their final matchup, but in their goaltending as well. I think Grubauer has done a really nice job of handling pucks that he's supposed to, about staying on the ice, being available, being healthy. I know that's a huge thing, especially in the playoffs for you guys last year. And here down in Vegas, it'll be a shock to me if Marc-Andre Fleury doesn't win the Vezina this year. And he played super well last night. Is he capable of giving up a couple of hiccups? Absolutely. We all are, JJ. You and I aren't sinless in this department as much as we like to forget and rinse and repeat and move on, because it happens so often. But it's about the competitive fire and spirit in these guys at this point, because these teams are so close. And Grubauer is a much more stay-at-home goaltender, does a really good job of handling his angles, handling his rebounds, and not getting too outside of himself. And Marc-Andre Fleury, yeah, he can flash the leather a little bit too much for my liking, because usually that means the defensemen aren't doing as good of a job to help him out. But it's going to be a true kind of I think heavyweight goaltending matchup, and it's just who blinks first, and then we'll see. We'll run the same drill tomorrow night.
For those Mile High Sports listeners and fans out there that are saying, Lindsey, this rings a bell, her voice really sounds familiar. Well, Lindsey's been doing the betting previews every day before Avs games on Mile High Sports and on the Twitter feed. So let's look into the betting a little bit, especially seeing as how you're out in Vegas. So right now I'm seeing the Avalanche at a -200. Looks like they're being picked to win in 6. Now, where would you place your money on any of those lines?
In terms of the -200 to win the game tomorrow, or is that the series?
The series. Those are series lines.
The series? Oh, my goodness. -200. I mean, I've said this all year. I think if everybody brings their best game, Colorado and Vegas, that Colorado has what we say in Chell for the EA Sports, a few 96s and 97s. Vegas has a bunch of 91s and 92s. It's great. We're awesome. But at the end of the day, I do like the Avs overall. 6 games, why not 7? Let's just leave room to breathe, and that would be a fun thing. I mean, they're nerve-wracking considering we just went through one, but we won it, so it's all fine and dandy. There's nothing bad associated with it. So in terms of the minus 200, though, it seems a little heavy to me, but it's the Avs. They're coming off a sweep, a ton of rest. They definitely they needed the rest more. I think I would be less worried about the rust factor, and so I'd say they're about spot on. But I'm more of a game-to-game type of betting person rather than the overall series.
Same.
I don't like being wrong.
I don't have the patience.
Yep, basically.
Speaking of game-to-game, Lindsey, I want to know your thoughts on whether the Habs can pull out the game tonight and force a Game 7. What do you think?
Well, I picked the Habs to beat the Leafs because I say the Leafs are what they are until they show me otherwise, which is a failure in the postseason. And they've gotten out to a good lead. It's obviously an elimination game, but aren't fans back in Bell Center today for the first time ever?
Yeah.
So I feel like will play a factor. They haven't been sprinkling in fans here like we have down in the United States, and it's tough for me to bet against playoff Carey Price, to be honest. And as the stage gets bigger, he did the same thing to Pittsburgh last year. So I think it's very much within reach. I would pick the Canadians to win tonight, and then you'd have to ask me again for Game 7.
Lindsey, my last question for you. Obviously these are two offensive teams. They can definitely score a lot of goals. Vegas kind of struggled through that first series to really bury a lot. Avalanche expected to score a lot, but I still get the vibe that this is going to be a low-scoring affair. Are you with me on that, or do you think the offenses are really going to be showing their stuff this series?
I think we'll see a good mix of both. This matchup all year has been very Jekyll and Hyde, but I think for the most part the games have been separated by one or maybe an empty net goal, low scoring, and I always bet on goalies showing up in big moments because this is what we train for. This is where taking pucks to the face and taking one-timer drills from inside the circles makes it all worth it because you can steal a save that you have no business doing on the biggest stage of all time. So I'd agree with you. I think it'll be low scoring, especially in the first couple games, just as these teams figure out exactly what they're bringing to the table in this new context. But then once somebody gets out to a lead, like you start playing desperate, you start taking more chances, and just as well as I do how contested that neutral zone is going to be between those two teams. And I think whoever dominates that has a really good chance of winning whatever game that happens to be played that particular night.
Lindsey, thanks so much. I actually lied. I got one more quick one. I follow you. You follow me on Twitter. You always have so much energy on your radio show or otherwise.
Thank you.
What's your secret? Is it espresso? Is it Red Bulls? What do you do?
It's mostly my medication bringing me down a little bit, but this is just kind of what I am. I don't have to display the same amount of stoicism that I did in the crease, so I think I'm kind of making up for lost time for my hockey career. And I don't know. I'm very excited about the sports, guys, but specifically about the hockey.
I love it. Love it. Thanks so much. And I'll actually be talking to you shortly when you join us for the podcast. So,
excellent.
I can't believe you double dipped on me.
Minutes.
Always. I talk to you soon, right. Lindsey. Thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Yeah.
There you have it. I'm always double dipping, Arif. Oh man, see, I just double dipped hard.
Leaving. Cut it. I'm out.
But yeah,
that's almost unforgivable.
That almost is. But yeah, check out the Hockey Mountain High podcast where we'll talk to Lindsey and break that down a little further for you before the game. But yeah, thanks to Lindsey for hanging out with us. We'll be right back. Get some more NHL and hockey stuff off our chest. Other than that, thanks for hanging out with us during the time. We'll be right back. The Hockey Show. JJ, not Arrow, and Danny Bailey. Welcome back, everybody. It's the Hockey Show. Segment 3, we're calling it, since it's not the man advantage, it's not PP2, it's just me and you back to 5v5, but we have a lot to talk about here. So strap in, everybody. Thanks for hanging out.
All the things.
Thanks for listening to some hockey.
Things.
First item of business is the stadium's reopening. You talked a little bit about it in segment 1 about Montreal allowing some fans.
2,500.
First team in Canada. 2,500. That's not too many, but of course we've rapidly seen Ball Arena go from 20% up to 40%. Now they're up to 14,000 fans.
57% or something like that.
Yeah, so that's exciting. Are you seeing an advantage coming from teams from the home crowd? I think we buy a little bit too into this in hockey. We love the home ice, but for some reason it never really generates too much of an X factor for the home team. But I think this year there might be a little bit of a different twist to it, considering how long they went without fans. So what are you seeing? What are your observations? What are the views of the world through Ryan's lenses?
Well, I wanted to ask Lindsey about this, but I also I couldn't think of a way to phrase it without sounding like a phallus. And what I wanted to ask was, Vegas had a fairly large crowd, right, last night, but it wasn't very loud on the broadcast. It's not that funny.
I thought it was.
But Nashville, I don't know what their capacity was for that game against Carolina, but they were so loud. And I'm like, I don't know if it's coming down to NBC being mic'd up differently or what the case was, but I feel like in a situation like in Nashville, it could potentially be an advantage. But where you're really going to see the discrepancy is somewhere like Toronto not having fans, but Montreal having fans, or somewhere like Montreal having 2,500 fans and Colorado having 14,000. Where the volume is going to be very skewed on one side, but really home ice advantage comes down to last change, right? That's the most important factor when it comes to it. You could have all the fans in the building, it could still be a lame crowd. It depends. And so much of it anymore, I feel like, is dependent upon game entertainment and their work pepping up the crowd and coaching the crowd into situations. It's not always natural fan interaction.
Yeah, I think you saw 3 cases in the last week, right? You saw Vegas, like you said, once they opened to a bigger crowd, they came out and didn't really do much, came out pretty flat. I think they lost that game. Then you had Nashville, and they started the game really strong. They got off to an early lead, but it eventually faded. And I think that's where, intermissions really halt momentum in hockey. I think.
Well, and our friend John Forsland, friend of the show John Forsland, and Pierre Maguire commented on it in that game, saying, when Carolina equalized, they really took the crowd out of the game for a minute, and I'm not sure it necessarily recovered from there. That's a strategy for teams too. Like if you can get the crowd out of it.
And then lastly, you saw in Long Island, right? They went back to Nassau Coliseum, had a lot of fans, and I think the fans really propelled the team to carry out that win and end up beating Pittsburgh. So you have a case that really supports all 3 theories, right? It doesn't help, it could help, and maybe even early, and it helps a lot. So I just think, with Ball Arena, it might be huge because this team seems to thrive off. I mean, we've heard it a couple times from players. That first game when they were in Arizona, and Colorado seemed to have more fans in the building than Arizona, and that they said that really lifted them and propelled them to end up winning that game. So I think a home playoff game with these Colorado fans that can get very rowdy at playoff time, I think it might create a bit of an advantage for Colorado.
I think as far as fandom goes, this is going to be a wild, wild year of people coming out of COVID hibernation and ready to get rowdy. So I don't know what to expect, really.
Yeah, maybe even some fights in the crowd, right? Even team-on-team fights.
Usually it's the opposing fans. It's like wild fans fighting wild fans or something in the crowd.
Another thing to go along with that conversation is Tampa Bay. They've always had this rule in their home building that they don't really allow jerseys of opposing fans down in the lower levels where you can see them on camera.
It's important to preface this right,
okay,
which you
go
did.
Ahead and preface.
Which you did. You prefaced it correctly, but there's a Club Lexus, if you're familiar with Ball Arena. There's a Club Lexus area in this arena, and one of the rules is no opposing team
paraphernalia,
memorabilia. I don't know, a lot of people bring in like weed pipes and stuff to the game, meth pipes, I don't know, but I just want to preface that before you get into what you're going to say. There's an area where it's required for your entry that you be wearing home colors or neutral.
So in Ball Arena as well, or are you just using that as a example?
No, I'm just saying that the area,
right? It's comparable.
Amelie Arena or whatever it's called is like similar to Club Lexus.
Right.
And there's a seating section and there's a lounge.
So now it sounds like they're going to lift that rule.
Well, you didn't even finish what you're saying.
Well, then you finish it because I lost.
So there's video that went around on Twitter, on social media, of a fan at the game getting quote unquote accosted by guest relations or security or whatever at the building, saying this guy can't wear his Florida Panthers jersey during the series. And for me, I had mixed feelings when I saw it. Like, I wanted to blast it out and be like, what the hell, this is ridiculous. But at the same time, that policy has been in place for a while. I remember it made more waves when they announced it years ago than it has in recent memory, because it was ridiculous. Like, you can't wear opposing gear to Bolts games, and then it was like, no, only in these sections. The guy had a point. Whether he made up somebody's name or not, he was saying that he spoke with somebody from Ticketmaster or the team that said, you can wear the jersey at your seats, you just can't wear it in the Club X lounge, right? And these people are just saying, no, we don't care what you were told. Like, our policy is X. And he says, I spent $300, $400 on these tickets, and you're going to make me leave? I would be livid. But he made, aside from maybe a little racism going on his part, he made an excellent point, which was, could I wear a T-shirt with a swastika on it down here? And the one security guy's like, well, probably not. And he's like, but is it in your policy? And I'm sure it's not. It may say, like inflammatory or obscene stuff. But, he made a good point. Like, if I could wear a T-shirt with a swastika on it down here, why can't I wear an opposing team's jersey? And as you said, now they're apparently lifting that rule,
right?
Which was ridiculous when they announced it 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world, sure, it'd be great to say, oh, well, we're not letting opposing fans, opposing colors, opposing anything down around the cameras, or so our players, our cameras, our TV broadcast can see. But that's the thing about the United States, is so many people move across the country on a regular basis that you're going to have out-of-towners going to your games to see their hometown team. I mean, I just booked a trip to Miami. Coincidentally, the Rockies are playing in Miami. I haven't seen a Rockies game in 2 years here in Colorado because I don't support what they're doing. But I have to go catch a Rockies game in Miami, right? Just so I could say,
do you?
Woo.
You have to?
I think I do. I think it'd be neat to go see another stadium.
The other aspect of that here is that Florida and Tampa have never played each other in the postseason. So,
and they're both in Florida. It's not even across the...
I mean, it's a drivable distance. It's a drivable distance.
I've made that drive. It's ugly.
Yeah, I flew from Fort Lauderdale from Tampa to Fort Lauderdale with the team. But I remember, like, Lauren Gardner drove, and she said she regretted driving at the time. But, you're going to see some people make the trek up. I get it. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, the buildings have been closed. Fans are itching to get out there. It's playoffs. Like, do you demand your money back if you're that guy? Because for me, the team should just be happy to be getting money. You're getting gate revenue from this guy. Who cares what jersey he's wearing? Yeah,
especially in today's landscape. Like, we just all need to be happy that we're out and allowed to do things. We don't need to put these crazy rules on people for no reason, right?
And it's a bit of smoke and mirrors, right? If you watch a Lightning game and you're like, look at all the Lightning jerseys in the building, and then you go, oh, well, that's because they don't allow anything else. You're like, oh, so it's fake.
Speaking of implementing crazy rules on people for no reason, I wanted to get into the conversation of booing Carmelo Anthony. I know it's not hockey, but we're going to tie it into hockey afterwards. Obviously, it's great to have the luxury of both the Nuggets and the Avalanche in the playoffs. Of course, there's a couple hurdles when it comes to scheduling, as you mentioned early in the show. But booing Carmelo was a huge topic in this town over the last week, and that stems from last Saturday's game. He came in, the crowd booed. I was one of them. I lost my voice because I booed him so hard. And he ended up going off, hitting some threes, and people were critical. Oh, this is why you don't boo Melo. So for this, I wanted to bring in Danny Bailey, obviously our basketball expert in the house. But I know Danny had an interesting take on the whole booing Carmelo situation.
Hit us.
Well, I'm against booing Carmelo, but at the same time, I had a great conversation with a couple of the other guys here. One of them, Anilo Piro, who actually wrote a piece on booing Carmelo for MileHighSports.com. It's everybody's choice to make for themselves. If you want to boo him. I totally get it. He left on bad terms, kind of left a bad taste in the mouth, and never really took responsibility for his part in the whole thing. Yeah. So he had kind of some bad things come out where he just seemed clueless to why it was happening, but he should know why it's happening. Lala has said some things that are a little disrespectful to Denver as well. But at the end of the day, I mean, Melo's the guy who kind of got me into basketball, first made me a basketball fan and a Nugget fan. And once he left the Nuggets, I was like, well, I'm a Nuggets fan. I'm not a Melo fan. So I'm still loyal to the Nuggets. I wouldn't personally boo him, but if everybody else wants to boo him, that's fine. I did say on Twitter when he was going off, everybody who's booing him, this is what you get for booing him. But at the end of the game, he kind of went away a little bit. So maybe the boos did start to get to him. It's part of sports, and that's why it's important to have people back in the stands, because even if not everyone agrees on it, I think it does play a role in the game. It plays a huge role to have that kind of noise, and whether it's, as long as it's saying things that are basketball related and not in any way like super offensive, because there have been some incidents that have happened with fans in the last week that have been offensive and disrespectful to the athletes, which is way over the line. Booing someone is perfectly in bounds. I just wouldn't choose to boo the man, but I can see why people do. And it's an important part of sports. I always love booing the refs or booing the umpires when they get announced in baseball games. That was something I learned from my grandpa. Maybe not the best behavior, but also they mess up a lot, and I think they need more accountability. So I have no problem with booing people, spitting on people, saying racist things as other players had to deal with. That's obviously out of bounds, way over the line, and unacceptable. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that even Denver fans who are very passionate about the Nuggets don't all agree on one side or the other whether Melo should be booed or not. Because I saw plenty of people on Twitter from both the local market, the national market doesn't matter as much. They don't get why people are booing Melo. But the people here, there are people on both sides of the aisle, and I think it was an interesting conversation to have all week.
Right, exactly. And I think it's because people forget. And so I wanted to draw the comparison to refresh everybody's mind.
I'm ready.
Right when Carmelo Anthony left is right about the same point Nathan McKinnon is right now, right? So let's hypothetically say the Avalanche make it not only past the Golden Knights into next round, and they miss the Stanley Cup final in Game 7 by one little stupid turnover. Suddenly, Nathan McKinnon gets married. His girlfriend wants him to play for the Rangers. He leaves.
Wife. Yeah.
Yeah, his wife wants him to go play for the Rangers, and he leaves. How do you think he would get his return? How do you think he would get received every single time he comes back to Ball Arena?
Well, first I got to say, if it's a collective, like, entire building thing and not one section, that's like he's on the dark side letting the hate flow through him, and he's only growing stronger because he's living rent-free in everybody's head. Everybody's so upset at Melo for comments made in, 1918 that they can't get beyond that, and it's fueling him. You know what I mean? I would say it depends on the situation. I know that he did not have a healthy exit from the fan base out of town. I would say it's similar to Matt Duchene, or it's similar to Ryan O'Reilly, or it's similar to Paul Stastny when it comes with the Avalanche. We don't have to go with the Nathan McKinnon scenario as much. These aren't necessarily guys that trash talk their way out of town, but they are guys that left. And there's a strong portion of the fan base that hates them simply for that.
But they didn't leave when the team was this close to winning a championship.
Sure, but they left. I mean, people love to hate on Ryan O'Reilly. People in the quote-unquote media were hating on Ryan O'Reilly even before the playoff series started, saying things like, I'm glad he found his passion for the game after he lost in Buffalo. I mean, P.S., look at where the Sabres are in this crazy world of hockey. They're still bad. But the guy won a Stanley Cup. He was named captain. He was playoff MVP, but people still hate him, and they're like, "Oh, how many points did Ryan O'Reilly have in that series?" Come on, it's ridiculous.
I just don't think any Avs fan would ever get over Nathan McKinnon requesting a trade at this juncture in where the Avalanche's growth is throughout the years. I think they'd never forgive him, and that's exactly what Carmelo did, and that's why I think a lot of people don't forgive him, like myself.
It wasn't always sunny in Colorado Avalanche land with Nathan McKinnon and his personality. So, there's a scenario where he could not be on this team, in an alternate timeline at this point. Whether that was his choice or the organization's remains to be seen. You know what I mean? But it's hard to bash on a guy who leaves under non-damaging circumstances. But people do it already. So I get that people would love to hate Melo because his circumstances for leaving came with extra baggage. It wasn't just like, I can't do it here anymore. There were comments made by Lala and things like that. And
it took the team years to recover.
It did. And it's tough because he was like one of the lone bright spots for the Nuggets organization for a long period of time.
Well, that'll do it for segment number 3 right here on the basketball show. Oh, wait. On the hockey show. On Mile High Sports with JJ and Ryan. We'll be right back. Stick with us at the break.
I play hockey and I fornicate because those are the two most fun things in cold weather.
Welcome back. It's the hockey show. Final segment here. Mixed bag skate. We're feeling good on a Saturday. It's a nice day out, or at least it was. Looks like clouds are coming in, but it's playoff time. We got both a first round game tonight and a second round game tonight. exciting stuff.
First time ever, again.
Crazy COVID schedules that are coming our way. But we got a couple more topics to get into here at the Mixed Bag Skate. We got 10 minutes to do so let's knock these out. Starting with the whole altitude debacle. We left that last segment talking about basketball and the Nuggets. Just the other day, you saw even Jamal Murray, the injured point guard for the Denver Nuggets, for those hockey fans that don't follow, came out to Twitter and even said, we need to get these games on TV. How ridiculous is it that the Nuggets aren't being watched during the playoffs? So obviously Avs fans share the same sentiment. Luckily, NBC has put everything on national TV. Nothing's been blacked out. But there's some developments going on with the altitude Comcast situation.
Yeah, so you put the luxury of having 2 playoff teams in Denver, and that's great if you can see them or you can go. Could you imagine if fans weren't allowed in the building right now and only half a quarter of the people could watch these games? It'd be ridiculous. So I saw tweets from Denver Mayor Michael Hancock saying, how ridiculous is it that I can't watch the Nuggets? It's actually been really one-sided.
Very
for the
one-sided.
Nuggets. Everything I was reading. So I can't remember who wrote this for the Denver Post. I know it was Singer. I can't remember, it's David Singer. But Singer has been the go-to guy on this Comcast situation for the Denver Post for a while. And he had a story up yesterday about how it had quotes from local lawmakers in the Colorado Senate and House talking about how if this can't get handled, then they may need to look into their avenues as lawmakers to find some sort of resolution. And Governor Jared Polis was on board with it, saying, yes, I agree. It's ridiculous. What I didn't know until I read that was that Nuggets games were blacked out nationally for the playoffs. Right. Whereas the Avs, it's a dual broadcast, so you can watch on NBC Sports or Altitude. Apparently not the case for the Nuggets in the network. They've been blocked out. I don't understand that whatsoever. I don't get it. And frankly, I don't even care. Like, there's one loser here, and that's the fans at this point. And so it doesn't matter whose side is right, more right, less right. Both sides are wrong.
You blew it!
And you have this opportunity. Like, could you imagine if the Broncos were in the playoffs and you couldn't see them on TV for some absurd, insane reason? Like, there'd be like riots on the streets out here. It would be crazy.
And you're right. I think there is a bit of a double standard when it comes to the Nuggets versus the Avalanche. Right now, the Nuggets are on TV and people are making noise. Even a player comes out and says something about it. Could you ever in a million years see Gabe Landeskog tweeting something anti-Kroenke like this?
Only if it was sponsored by Bud Light, which seems to be the only time he posts on social media. But I think, there's always been a bit of a bias against the Avalanche when it comes to this kind of thing. I think the Nuggets are generally the more beloved and popular team in the city of those two sports, right? But it's just absurd that it's come to the point where local lawmakers are like, okay, what can we do? Nothing really, I don't think. But they're going to look into it. Maybe they pass some meaningless, resolution that's just to call attention to the fact. I don't know. But it's just gotten to the point where it's so ridiculous. What's the end game here?
Right, and I think their biggest mistake was not thinking the fans would learn to adapt and use streaming and figure out how to figure it. I mean, everybody I knew who wasn't exactly technologically savvy 2 years ago now knows how to stream Nuggets and Avs games.
It blows my mind how people who can't even check their email know how to find a stream to watch the game illegally. But if anybody who knew anything about the Silk Road and how you could buy whatever drugs and guns and whatever you wanted on the dark web, obviously you're going to be able to find ways to watch these games. You might end up with Russian, Chinese malware on your computer after watching some of these links, but you're going to find a way to get these games in regardless. And they should just be lucky that fans are allowed, that enough people have been vaccinated, that science has gotten us to this point where fans could be in the building. Because otherwise, I mean, these teams would be hemorrhaging cash if fans weren't allowed in the buildings because nobody can watch the games. At least for the Avalanche, we're on to round 2. It's all NBC from here.
Yep. Sticking with the TV theme, we get the announcement this week that Wayne Gretzky decides to leave the Oilers and join TNT. Did you even know he was with the Oilers?
I did.
I didn't.
His brother, I believe, too. Yeah, it's great for TNT. we've started to see. I think. Would you rather? I'll post a hypothetical for you and everyone out here in Hockey Lane. Would you rather see Wayne Gretzky on a panel or in studio on TNT next season, or have to listen to 2 words come out of Mike Babcock's mouth on NBC this season?
Right. I'd love to hear Wayne Gretzky's thoughts and pick his brain via television broadcast, but I just hope he brings the pizzazz that we know he doesn't have, right? I mean, and that's the issue. Why is there no player out there that has the combination of personality and skill to go with being a great player that they want on the board, not just the Paul Bissonnets of the world?
Let's give TNT some credit for what they've done with, what is it?
Inside credit, I mean, for real.
Inside the NBA, or what is the show with Shaq and Charles Barkley?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. They've done an excellent job at producing that and putting that together. There's the potential for something like that here. The problem is that you don't have necessarily the personalities in hockey that you do in other sports. These large, flamboyant, loud, outspoken guys. You don't generally have them. I would argue it's probably not fair to say that lots of those guys are probably 3rd, 4th line type players, and they're not necessarily considered. Like a lot of guys, it happens. But a lot of guys, the guys considered, great hockey minds aren't necessarily those players generally. But you do, like I said, you do see it. Jared Bednar is obviously a great coach. He wasn't necessarily the most exceptional player. Wayne Gretzky was an exceptional player, maybe not the best coach, right? So there's some room there. We obviously know that he's a bit of white bread personality-wise, but maybe they find a companion for him that fits the other shoe.
And that's what's so funny. I mean, you always hear in every locker room, oh, we got a great group of guys. They like to keep it fun. They like to keep it light. But the second the camera's on, it's a robot. It's a robot.
We heard that today with Ryan Graves. He said the same thing in his presser like 3 or 4 times per question, but also kept saying how they're keeping it light and keeping it fun.
Sticking with the TV theme still, I'm not sure if you saw, but Stephen A. Smith of ESPN, he went out there on a limb and made a take about the Edmonton Oilers getting swept. I thought it was a good take. It was knowledgeable. He's given an effort. And then what does Sportsnet do? Of course, they got to look their nose down on ESPN and Stephen A. Smith for trying and giving the classic, oh, you don't know my sport take, and kind of made fun of him for simply giving his take and doing his job and what ESPN is trying to evolve into.
It reminds me of how there's this annual column that comes out on local media sites that is the hockey guy. Hockey fans don't let other fans watch their sport but complain about how nobody watches their sport concept. That if a former, let's say, co-owner of this place used to post annually, he even posted it twice in like 3 weeks once. I had to call him out for that. But, I think there's a bit of elitism in the sport, but it makes I think it's overblown, right? And I think anybody, any team, any media network not willing to take advantage of someone like Stephen A. Smith willing to wade in there and bring some crazy and some boisterous, loud, outspoken personality to the sport is in the wrong and won't be around very long, right? Like this is a new era for the sport. They're moving to ESPN. You're going to see a lot of Stephen A. Smith. We're moving to TNT. Who knows? Bring in Shaq. Bring in Charles Barkley. Bring in Phil Mickelson to do some I don't even care. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, here's your opportunity to do something new and unique and not stale, and also to not put games on CNBC and USA Network, in the middle of 8 games on one night and 2 games the next night. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here.
Shame on Sportsnet, first of all. I think that's really what I'm most disappointed about is whoever is in charge of their Twitter for taking that.
I know somebody who's in charge. I'll be curious to find out.
Yeah, throw some stones at them. Lastly, maybe second to last, depends on how much time we get through. Alan Heppel let go. I know that's a guy you knew very fondly and very well. He's been around the team for a long time, and he had his fingerprint all over this team. So what's your take on them letting him go?
I couldn't believe it. I saw Elliot Friedman tweeted it. I immediately texted him and said, I'm sorry. The vibe I got was that this was not mutual. I can't say that for certain. It's just the feeling I got around the whole thing. I guess some guys were up for contracts and some got renewed and his didn't. And Wade Klippenstein is the new director of amateur scouting for the Avalanche, and he's been around since 2016, I believe, so not a long time. There's some guys that have been around longer. I'm not sure what happens in the back rooms on this one. Maybe they couldn't agree on money, but I think Heppel's great. I think he's a great mind. He really knows what he's talking about. He, when I've been involved, has been involved in the drafts that got Mikko Rantanen, Tyson Jost, Connor Timmins, Cale Makar. You know, his like you said, his fingerprints are all over this current Avs squad. So I don't know how that decision is made, and I tweeted this out, but I can't imagine that he stays on the open market very long.
And my last thought, Kazakhstan in the IHF World Championships right now is an absolute wagon. They beat Germany, they barely lost to Canada, and they beat Latvia by a landslide today. Watch out for Kazakhstan. That'll do it today for the hockey show. They even have somebody with the same last name as Borat, I think. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back next week, talk more playoff hockey. Enjoy round 2, and thanks for hanging out with us right here. JJ, Ryan, Danny Bailey. See you later.